Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Ned Bellavance, Ned1313 on Twitter, and welcome to the Daily Check-In for September 23rd, 2020. It's Wednesday, which means it's Tech Analysis Wednesday, and since Microsoft Ignite is going on right now, I thought that would be a relevant topic for the day. So that's what I'm going to talk about, the things that I've seen so far, the announcements that they've made, and kind of how I think it advances tech in general and Microsoft's angle in particular. Now, for those of you who know me, you know I'm also a Microsoft MVP, so this stuff is near and dear to my heart, and I've been to many of the Ignites. In fact, I've been to all of them except last year, which was a little sad, but I couldn't afford it, and I didn't get to go as a speaker, so it just didn't go. So I'm going to talk about that. Before I get down into that, don't have any housekeeping stuff. I just want to check in with you. How you doing? It's Wednesday. You made it to Wednesday. Oh, yeah. I mean, sometimes that is impressive. I hope you're doing something fun on Wednesday. Maybe something fun this evening to sort of get you over the hump. I am going to be going to soccer practice, which is not always the most exciting thing, but my son absolutely loves playing soccer, and it makes me happy to see him happy. So I'll be sitting in a foldable chair of some kind, watching him scrimmage with his buddies, and it's getting to the point where it's not just clumps of them running around the same ball. So that's probably good. All right, so let's talk about Microsoft Ignite. And just so you know, I'm wearing the Ignite shirt from 4 years ago. Let's get that in the picture. So yeah, I don't normally like to wear vendor branded stuff on this, but you know what? This seemed apropos for this specific tech analysis because I've been to so many Ignites. Anyway, humble brag. So anyway, what was introduced? What was new and interesting in this year's Ignite? Well, I think the overriding theme for this is Microsoft is really trying to modernize some of their existing product portfolio to be cloud focused, and that's not a surprise. It's something they've been doing for years, right? Like Azure Active Directory was a reimagining of Active Directory. Office 365 is a reimagining of Exchange and SharePoint and all those different products, but offered as a cloud service. What about some of their other management products like System Center Operations Manager, which is called SCOM, the whole System Center suite of products? How have those been updated and rebranded? So there's been some progress in that and a little bit of confusion as well. But one of the big things that they rolled out as a preview last year was something called Azure Arc. And at the time, I didn't get it. I will be absolutely 100% transparent. I heard the announcement and I was like, all right, I don't know what this is for or why anybody would use it. But now I kind of get it. And they rolled out some generally available stuff too. So Azure Arc, the whole idea behind it is it's a management and monitoring cloud-based tool that you can apply to your existing data centers and also out to the edge. So if you have this broad portfolio of things that are running in Azure, they're running in your data center, you've got stuff out at the edge, you have branch offices, you have maybe deployments in Google Cloud or AWS, and you want to manage all of those different things and also be able to deploy some stuff to those things, Azure Arc is there. So it's just this overarching arc of things that you can do. And they took a lot of existing products and sort of combined them together under this umbrella to get this thing going. Now, what did they announce specifically for Ignite? Well, one is that data services has officially gone into public preview. And I think that was in private preview before. Data services is the idea that you can roll out Azure SQL, essentially, but on premises as a managed instance. So it'll be managed from the cloud, but it's a SQL server that's running in your data center. Or you can run Azure Postgres at their hyperscale version or whatever, also in your data center or maybe out on the edge or in a branch office. You can deploy it through Arc and manage it through Arc. So that's kind of cool, and that's in preview. So now we've got sort of a managed database component. You can think of this as sort of the cloud expanding down into the data center as opposed to the things moving up to the cloud. We've kind of got this inverse going on here, which is kind of nice. Okay, so that was what they announced. What else did they announce? Server management is now GA. What's server management, you ask? So server management is the ability to manage Windows and Linux servers from your Azure Arc console, regardless of where they are. And so you could have them in your data center or out at the edge or a branch office or whatever. And that includes things like monitoring and updates, which you could kind of do before, but probably most importantly out of all of this is the fact that you can apply Azure policies to these servers. Why does that matter? Who cares about this? Okay, so who cares about this? People who were using something else to drive the policy before. So think about someone who's using group policy, for instance. What if you could apply a consistent policy and not use group policy for that? That seems useful. Well, Azure Policy lets you create these policies for, the servers that you want to work with, and you don't have to use group policy to do it. So you're not using this old-fashioned version of policy management. You now have a newer version of policy management that hopefully works a little bit better. So, some of that remains to be seen, but I thought it was certainly interesting at least. Okay, so that's Azure Arc, and one of those is GA, and the other one is in public preview, which before it was in private preview. So cool, now it's in public preview. Perfect. What else did I see? Azure Stack Hci has been evolving, and Azure Stack Hci is another thing that initially I didn't get it. Because there was already Azure Stack Hub, which used to just be Azure Stack, and they rebranded it as Azure Stack Hub because, of course, they needed to name it something else. But the reason was because they rolled out Azure Stack Hci, which is not really the Azure Stack that I think of. I was involved very early on Azure Stack, and the whole idea behind that was it was a managed and verified hardware stack from Microsoft that, lock and key on that. You couldn't get into the hypervisors. It was very locked down, and it gave you a private version of Azure running in your data center that could be disconnected. That was really cool. It was also really expensive, had to be on verified hardware, only for people who were willing to drop at least $250,000 on hardware. That's who it was for. So definitely popular, but not super popular. The idea that came up originally, the idea was that you'd be able to run Azure Stack Hub on whatever hardware you wanted. Well, that's kind of cool. But they rolled that back because of all the issues with properly setting it up. Well, now Azure Stack Hci is using traditional Hyper-V and Windows management solutions, but it's running on hardware that's not fully verified, but at least it's approved by Microsoft from these different vendors. So you have the opportunity to do it that way. Skip frames. So Azure Stack Hci, you deploy it yourself, or your hardware vendor can deploy it for you, but it's on commodity hardware, and you get visibility into the inner workings, like the hypervisor and everything. So it's not nearly as locked down as Azure Stack Hub. One of the interesting things is now they are rolling out Azure Kubernetes service on Azure Stack Hci, and it's all managed from Azure. So if that's of interest to you, because I think Azure Stack Hci is also managed from Azure, now you can manage AKS running on premises from Azure along with all your other AKS clusters. And now we're getting into this sort of multi-cluster Kubernetes management, which is something that people are looking for. And this is something that Microsoft is trying to create a solution around. So that was interesting. The next one was Azure VMware Solution, or AVS. And the only thing I want to say about this is the new version of it has gone GA. This is basically catch up to everyone else who's running a VMware, or specifically AWS who's running VMware, VMware on AWS. The VMware and AWS is a direct partnership between AWS and VMware. This is, VMware blesses it, but Microsoft is managing it. So this is really just catch up. The nice thing is they've integrated it with their Azure Migrate product, and it uses HCX to migrate virtual machines from your on-premises to this AVS solution. So if you want to get your VMware solution into Azure, it seems like it's pretty straightforward to do so. The last thing that I want to mention is Edge stuff. So a bunch of announcements around Edge stuff. I think the most interesting things to me is Azure Sql Edge is now GA. Azure SQL Edge is a version of SQL that's meant to run on IoT and gateway devices. So if you need to do some database thing out on the edge, you now have that option with Azure SQL Edge, and you can deploy it and manage it from Azure. So really, I think that's the running theme through all of this is Microsoft wants Azure to be your one-stop shop for all of your management needs. Azure Arc is that overarching thing that's going to do that. And everything else that they're rolling out is meant to roll up into this, I hate to say single pane of glass, but this one thing that's used to manage all of your resources regardless of where they are. And that's the story they want to tell. It's really interesting. I think that's the key takeaway for me. We'll see how it works out in the next year and certainly what the new announcements will be at next Ignite. But for me, those are the main announcements that really caught my eye for this year's Ignite. And that is all the time I have today. So tomorrow's Thursday. Thursdays, I've been doing Raspberry Pi stuff, and you better believe I've got another Raspberry Pi thing for tomorrow. So